Welcome to the Nurse Shark Academy Show, a Baxter Professional Services production.
Welcome to the Nurse Shark Academy Show, where we're experts in nursing and experts in business. I'm Tina Baxter, your host. The Nurse Shark Academy Show highlights nurse business owners and others in the healthcare field who promote entrepreneurship. We interview nurse leaders and encourage them to tell their story. Today's guest is Giovanna Navarro. All right, today's episode, how one nurse uses her knowledge of neuroscience to prevent nurse burnout.
Hello, and welcome to the Nurse Shark Academy. I'm Tina Baxter, and I'm your host today. And our mission at the Nurse Shark Academy is to expand the consciousness of nurses as experts to reflect their individual and collective power by promoting self-agency through inspiring nurses to dream big, reach far, and soar to new heights in business and the profession of nursing, thereby producing a healthier and richer society. The Nurse Shark Academy Show highlights nurse business owners and others in the healthcare field who promote entrepreneurship. We interview nurse leaders and encourage them to tell their story. Join us and support these wonderful nurse entrepreneurs and leaders. Today's guest, we'd like to welcome Giovanna Navarro. She is the owner of Empowered Nurse Coaching out of Austin, Texas. Giovanna is an extraordinary healthcare professional with a passion for empowering nurses to embrace holistic wellness paired with proven scientific research strategies and reach new heights in their personal and professional lives. With a unique blend of expertise as a research nurse and neuroscience, HeartMath practitioner, NeuroChangeSolutions Consultant, and holistic nurse coach, she travels around the world and has been able to revolutionize the lives of nurses, business owners, and corporations from diverse backgrounds. Her main focus is helping nurses prevent or overcome burnout, handle everyday stressors at work and home, including nurse bullying, and find the best path so they can fall in love with nursing again, regardless of the current flaws in our healthcare system. That's very impressive, and I want to welcome to the show, Giovanna.
Hi, Tina. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Me too. I'm so excited to be here. So much so I forgot to even plug in my headphones. I wonder why it was sounding funny.
There we go. Now we've got it.
Awesome.
Great. All right. So, like I always want to ask, tell me, what made you become a nurse? How did you get started in nursing?
Awesome. That's a great question. So actually, I can tell you that when I was in Costa Rica, which is where I'm from, in high school, they make us do some community hours, some clinical hours, which is part of graduating from high school. So I chose to work with seniors in a community and also with orphans. And when I started working with them, I felt such compassion, such joy that I decided, I think this is the route that I want to go. And also, ever since I was a little girl, if we want to go on the side note, I always dreamed that I was healing people and animals with my hands, but I was frustrated in my dreams because I couldn't heal them completely. So when I tied up those dreams with how good I felt at those community centers, I knew right away that I was just born to be a nurse.
So did you study nursing in Costa Rica or was it here in the U.S.?
I did a little bit of both. So I went to college in Costa Rica and I got my degree. And I've always been a U.S. citizen. So, I didn't have to worry about visas or green cards or anything like that. But the nursing process to get a nursing license here in the U.S., it's very thorough. Like, it's not just the NCLX, but you have to take another test, which is for foreign nurses, that proves that you can work in the U.S. So I graduated from college, took those tests, took the NCLX, and then I finally got my license here in Texas, and I've been here ever since.
Oh, that's wonderful. So what made you move from Costa Rica to Texas? I mean, what led to it?
My brother. I blame it on my brother. So my older brother, he's a physician, and he applied for residency as a family practice doctor here in Austin, Texas. And as soon as he moved here, he will email me every single day. They need nurses. There's a shortage of nurses. And, since we lived here in the past, you should come work. And he went on and on for like 6 months until he convinced me to move over here to Austin, Texas. And I actually appreciated that he was so persistent on this.
I find that fascinating because my good friend and mentor, she actually moved to Costa Rica. She retired and moved to Costa Rica.
Yes, yes. A lot of people are moving to Costa Rica, but I'll tell you what I tell everyone. Costa Rica is a very beautiful country. It's very sacred. It's got really good vibes, if you want to call it, but it's so expensive to live in that tourists or people that have saved their money from other countries can move there, can afford to live there, but the locals can't. It's really unbearable. That's why.
Yeah, yeah, and that's pretty sad. And then knowing that in some of those countries overseas, because we get a lot of Filipino nurses coming too,
Hmm.
where I live in this area, there's a big Filipino population. And one of the things I've noticed in doing the shows is that there's been a big black backlash from drawing nurses from other places to come serve the Western society. And so my
Yes.
question is, when you were in Costa Rica, did you work as a nurse, and what was the environment like working there?
Well, yes, I did work for a nurse for a little while in the main hospitals, like the city hospitals. We have what we call social security, kind of like in Canada. So the healthcare
Hmm.
system is all the community. And I can tell you that I was bullied so much by the nurses. It was
Hmm.
incredible. When you're a new grad in those countries, in those hospitals, they make your life impossible. Like they will hide the medications, they will hide the gauze, they will hide the IV tubing, anything, you name it. They just made it impossible because they're like, oh, you're brand new, you're supposed to know all this and to do it all, so don't come ask me for questions. So it was very tough, I'll tell you. It really made me question if I was born to be a nurse, really.
And that's interesting to hear about that phenomenon of nurse bullying, because we typically see a lot of the research is in Western countries about this phenomenon. I don't recall seeing it, and maybe I just didn't look, but I don't recall seeing anything coming from Costa Rica or any of those other countries that have that same thing. And I'm wondering, is it a nursing thing, or is it, a power thing based in that country? It just seems like this is a universal phenomenon for nurses, particularly in New.
Yes, yes, and I'm so glad that you bring this point up because actually, what I do for work right now, we do a lot of brain scans. We do EEGs to see how the brain works when you're anxious, when you're stressed, when you're not, and we do a lot of blood work as well. And we have been able to prove that people that leave that have like a high pressure jobs that have a lot of stress on them, they develop these unhealthy coping mechanisms because they're pretty much in survival mode, right? So why does a nurse become a bully? Because they're in survival. They feel like they need to prove themselves, that they need to defend their own well-being at all costs, and they project that frustration on other nurses. So I think it's something very related to nursing, but it's a just an unhealthy coping mechanism because we are under so much pressure, under so much stress that we just become moody,
Yeah, yeah.
pretty much.
I think there's that peer-to-peer bullying, and I'm just wondering if part of that trickles down. There's been a lot of studies about interprofessional relationships too. So you have doctors screaming at nurses, and now the nurses are yelling at the lab techs. All those different things that are happening. And I'm just wondering if part of that is because we've been so stressed out, having to deal with already being short of staff, but now adding a pandemic, and then coming out of that, and then you're still short staff even more, and that type of thing.
Yes, yes, everything piles up for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, well, looking at your background, you've been in med surge and telemetry and neurology. What was that like?
I actually loved it. It was challenging in a good way because I learned so much. There's so many things that you learn only when you walk out the door. There's you can read all the books, you can be a bookworm, but once you're out there in the field, it's a completely different story. And there were so many things that I didn't know how to do them. There's so many conditions that I didn't know about. But at the same time, I've always had like this very curious, very proactive way of seeing things. So even though it was hard and it was stressful, I was just like, this is new. I'm just learning. So I actually moved pretty quickly from med search to telemetry because of that. Like I wanted to continue to challenge myself to learn new things. And the hospital that I was at, it had the telemetry unit right next to the IMC unit. So I remember looking at the IMC unit and all the nurses, I'm like, that is so cool. I want to be like them. I want to be like an IMC nurse. And then I was, let's call it, upgraded to the IMC. And from there, I remember there were two doctors, two cardiologists. One was from Spain and the other one was from Puerto Rico. So since we all spoke Spanish, we got along really well. And one of them wanted me to go work for a doctor's office. And they're like, this, I'm telling you, this was back in, gosh, maybe 2002. And he was like, I'll pay you $30 an hour so you can go work at the office for me because I need a bilingual nurse that knows about cardiology. I'm like, no, I want to stay in the hospital because I was just like enjoying it so much, learning so much from that. And I'm actually glad that I stayed because after over like a year, that other doctor that I mentioned, he was the EP doctor, and he said, do you want to come work at the EP lab for us? And I was super excited because at that time you really had to apply, go through an internship for a whole year. You needed ICU experience, but there was a big need. So even though I didn't have ICU experience, just IMC and telemetry, they still accepted me. And that was a completely different world to work in the EP lab and the cath lab. So I'm very grateful for my years in the hospital, for
Well,
sure.
I heard two things out of this. One was a healthy curiosity and the willingness to try new things, very important. And developing your career in any field, but particularly in nursing. And the other thing you talked about was the power of relationships, of having those relationships with those doctors so that opportunities came, that you were able to just walk into. And so that's very powerful.
It is. It is actually very powerful. And it surprised me, Tina, to be honest, because, I was a brand new nurse. I only had like what, maybe 2 or 3 years working at the hospital. And it was for the HCA system. And they usually have they have the Caregiver of the Year award. And they actually gave me one. And I was just like, what? Me? Why? And they were like, well, because of that, because, you're always helping you, even though you're stressed, you have this very proactive way of seeing things and keeping this composed state. And we want to reward you for that. I was just like, okay, that was a big surprise. I mean, I thought it was normal, but I guess maybe it wasn't at that time. Yeah.
Well, I think that's wonderful. Was it the Daisy Award?
No, it was called the Caregiver of the Year Award. It was
Caregiver of
back
the Year Award.
in
Okay.
2005 and for the HCA system. Yeah. It was fun.
Oh, okay. Well, congratulations. You know
Thank you.
what?
Thank you.
I think we don't get enough recognition as nurses.
No, no, we never get enough of that. We should celebrate every single day because we're
So
amazing.
if you're not a nurse and you're listening to this podcast and you know a nurse, fake a nurse.
For
And more
sure.
importantly, get them to listen to the podcast.
That too, for sure.
Okay. And so how did you get into the behavioral health neurology side?
Well, turns out that, despite me loving the hospital so much, I was pregnant with my first daughter. And on the EP lab, you actually have different schedules. So you work Mondays to Fridays. And I was working 16, 17 hours every single day from Monday to Friday. And I was pregnant. I'm like, there's no way I can keep up with this. This is just straining the life of me. So I decided to resign from the hospital and worked for a clinic. It was a clinic that had 5 cardiologists there. I completed my pregnancy. I had my daughter, but then I was just like, I don't want my baby to be raised in a daycare. I want to spend more time with her. So I started looking around for work from home positions for nurses. And I ran into this title that was called care managers. And I was just like, I thought it was like a case manager in the hospital, but it was actually a very different field where you do telephonic phone calls to different patients that are collected through insurance. So I was working with police force. I was working with the Philadelphia Teamsters, which was really fun to work with all those truckers and learning about all the struggles that they have, caregivers and whatnot. And I realized that I was really good at educating patients about medications, medical conditions, and whatnot. But I felt that I was lacking in the behavioral health kind of side. I was like, how do I motivate this person to actually change? How can I empower them so that they can believe in themselves and change these habits? And that's when I started to question again my curious mind, like, how do I do this? And I started researching online if there was something for nurses like psychology or psychiatry. And I wasn't ready to commit to like a master's or a doctorate degree at that time. And that's when I found that nurse coaching was actually a relatively new field for us. And I contacted the board of nursing here in Texas. And I said, so which academies can certify you for this? So they gave me a list from there. I looked up the academy that kind of made more sense to me. And I was actually completing the program for 6 months. I graduated. And right after that, they were looking for nurses in Fitbit in Google. And I was excited because I actually take that back. They were not looking for nurses, they were looking for health coaches.
Okay.
But I was just like, well, I mean, if you look at health coaches and nurse coaches, we do pretty much the same, but we have a medical background, so we actually have more to offer on the plate. And this was has always been a pet peeve of me with companies that saying that a nurse cannot be a health coach. So, anywho, I decided to apply for that job, and it was the weirdest interview of my life, Tina. It was so funny because it was on Zoom. There were
Hmm.
8 people, like 8 people, sitting in a room, and I was just like standing here in my little camera, and they're like, we just needed to talk to you because we had never heard about a nurse coach. Like, you need to tell us what this is. And it was like all the people from Google. I was like, oh my God, I felt like, like I had done some kind of crime. But it was really fun because that interview actually lasted for 3 hours with all those 8 people of me
Wow.
telling me what nurses do, what a nurse coach is. And they decided to give me this position as the head coach for the new department that was Fitbit Health Solutions. They were creating this brand new program right from start, and they wanted me to pitch in, and it was so wonderful because I kept learning about behavioral health. I learned about data science. I learned about digital health because Fitbit has those watches, so I was monitoring patients from both sides, like their vitals, um, their blood and blood pressure, their glucose, their steps, their heart rate, their sleep, and also the medical condition. So I think that was one of my favorite jobs of all time, to combine coaching with nursing for sure.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. And I'm,
Yes,
I'm wondering if some of those programs are still around.
they are. Some of them have shut down because of cost. They found
Mhm.
out that it's cheaper to hire a health coach than a nurse. That's the sad truth about it.
That
But
is
now
that.
it's picking back up. After COVID, I've been noticing that because I'm in touch with a lot of people that are business owners or coaches. So it's starting to pick back up. And I would say, for nurses that are considering other jobs beyond the hospital, definitely look into nurse coaching and get those certifications because it's worth it. It's a really fun and exciting field for us.
Sounds wonderful. That sounds wonderful. And so you went through your certification process, and how did you then get from there to starting your own business?
Well, life is full of surprises, right? So I was having that beautiful job at Fitbit. It was so much fun. But again, upper management made a call and say, this is not, they're not seeing the revenue that they were hoping to see. So they decided to fire all 10 of us coaches. So I was out looking for a job again, but I had fallen in love from working from home. So I'm like, I'm just going to keep looking for this to see what else I can do. So I got another job for another company, but this one was a little bit more stressful because you had to be on the phone nonstop, like 8 hours a day. And it was hard, with kids at home. I had my second son at that time. It was hard to keep, toddlers quiet, making sure there wasn't any background noise. It was late hours, and there was just something not right about that. And I've always been really good about taking care of myself. Like, I was eating healthy, organic foods, you name it, working out 6 times a week. But something started happening within me that I was feeling tired every day. My joints started to hurt. I wasn't sleeping well. I was like more anxious. I was not as patient with my husband and my kids. And I was just like, and I started gaining weight all of a sudden. I couldn't figure out what it was. Long story short, I go to the doctor, they do tests, and I was actually diagnosed with burnout and an autoimmune disease. And I was like completely shocked at what had happened to me. How did this even happen? And I started researching other methods because my rheumatologist wanted me to take a medication that had really serious side effects. And for me, because I have an issue on my right optic nerve, I was with a big chance of losing sight, losing my vision. So I said, I'm not going to take this medication. There has to be another way. There's something inside of me. There was this voice saying, this cannot be the end of me. I'm not going to be an autoimmune patient for the rest of my life taking 20 medications. So a friend of mine said, have you ever looked into the mind body connection, how to see yourself as a whole? And even though I was a coach and I was really familiar with holistic approaches and functional medicine, I had never really considered other methods like yoga or meditation. And this friend recommended that I started to look at videos from Dr. Joe Dispenza. And it just clicked. It clicked for me because if you never heard about Dr. Joe Dispenza, he's been on the field for about 30 years. And he's been actually studying this, like what are the benefits of meditation, but he's gathering all the scientific data, all the medical proof of this, and he's been publishing papers about this. And that fascinated me as a nurse because I was really skeptic about this. I thought it was just woo woo stuff. But when I saw the science and the medicine behind it, I was completely hooked. And there I was, I would even laugh at myself. I'm like, oh my God, I'm doing yoga every day. I'm meditating every day, even though I criticize people like this my entire life. But it changed my life. It completely changed my life. And that's when I said, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. I healed from my autoimmune disease. I felt better. And I felt like people needed to know more about this. Like I just wanted to scream it at the top of my lungs. So that's what led me there.
There's something to be said for the woo woo, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So and that's what I like about what we do. We had another guest here that did a scan on me using your voice and was
Yes.
explaining some of the things that, to look out for in my environment and things like that. It was really great. And I think as, with Western medicine, we've kind of poo-pooed a lot of things, but there's ancient wisdom out there that we need to tap into and need to be studied and researched so that we can add this to our repertoire. I mean, you can't think that a pill will solve everything.
Yes, no, definitely. And I'll plant the seed even more, Tina, on this. If we look at the research and the studies that have been done, we are seeing now that the US is one of the countries that has the biggest amount of chronic diseases, the biggest percentage of them, including, we can pile in there anxiety, depression, and so many other things. And it's exactly because of this. Eastern medicine, on the other side, is not there. Of course, they have issues, but it's not as bad as it is here in the US. And it's exactly because of that. And in the Western world, we are taught that our feeling our emotions is wrong. Like, God forbid, especially in the Saturn states, if you tell someone that you're depressed or that you have a mental health issue, they're going to look at you weird, right? And God forbid if you say, I want to go to a psychologist, I want to go to a psychiatrist, or I have a therapist, you're seen as this weird creature. And the other thing is, like, we don't acknowledge our emotions. We have this false belief that we always have to be positive and feeling good. And if you're sad, if you're stressed, if you're anxious, there's something wrong with you. And it's such a myth, actually. Both emotions are good, and we need to feel them, acknowledge them, and learn how to control them in a very neutral state. That you always have a point of choosing how you want to feel in a very controlled state. And here in the US, I don't think they teach us that. Not just for us nurses, because when we're nurse, they teach us that we have to be always stressed, always under pressure, but the general population as well. So I think there's much to learn about this. And I have seen it firsthand. When we do the EEGs, I can tell just by looking at the screen someone who's dealing with anxiety. I can tell someone who's not sleeping well or who's having a bad relationship. And it's there. So it's just not wishful thinking. It's true. I mean, there's the EEGs, there's the HRV, like you said, the voice scans, body language, so many things that we can study so that we can prove to people that, how you're feeling and how you're thinking has a big impact in your life. It's not just theory. Here are the facts.
I do this a lot when I'm working with entrepreneurs about their mindset. And what I understand is that a lot of times if your mind is focused on limitations and scarcity and there's not going to be enough business, you're not going to get enough clients, and you're not going to be able to do whatever, then that's what you're going to pull into your atmosphere. That's what's going to be around you. And I was having this very conversation with my niece, and explained to her, I said, people respond to what you put out there. They will match your energy. So if your energy is very negative, you're going to look around and see a bunch of negative people around you. And I recognize that in my own sphere when my business was really struggling and I was struggling and I was going through a really tough time, understanding why I was going through a tough time. I looked around me and I saw, because I was negative, I was feeding off of the negativity of other people. And when I shifted my mindset, oddly enough, that's when those relationships changed.
Mm-hmm.
And I started putting myself around more positive people. And I began to think more positive. And of course, I'm from Indiana, the Midwest, and they're looking at me like, okay, why is she Miss Pollyanna all of a sudden? It's because I started pouring into myself positive things and limiting those negative mindsets that were coming at me.
Exactly, exactly. It's so well said. I mean, what I teach on a daily basis is exactly about that. Like how you think, how you act, and how you feel. It's what's creating your reality, right? It's what's creating your circumstances. And if we look at this, there's other scans that we do that we can measure. And I teach this on my sessions with patients because we have software for this. It's like our emotions and our thoughts create this electromagnetic field around us. So just like you said, if what you're projecting is this kind of, let's call it energy, and you're feeling like with those limiting beliefs that you're insecure, that you're not doing things right, who are you going to connect with? People that feel exactly the same way,
Yep.
right? Or you're
Yep.
creating those circumstances. But if you feel worthy, if you feel enough, if you feel grateful, even though things might not be perfect, that field is going to send that frequency. And who are you going to call? People that feel like that. You're going to call those opportunities, those resources, the people that are going to help you create the change. So again, that's the cool thing, and that's why I'm so passionate about this, because it's not just like all theory or Eastern medicine. There's actually like software and things that we can show the people to say, if you're thinking and feeling this way, this is what you're attracting. So it's your choice. Do you want more of this, or do you want to create a change in your life?
What I want our listeners to understand is that we are not just what you see flesh, right? There's more to us. There is an energy about us. We create our own energy, and we can actually use our energy to power other things. So when you think about that, when you think about how energy works, you think about how atoms work, when you think about the polarity that you have, it makes sense that if you invite those negative things into your atmosphere, that negativity will become part of you. Um, and so understanding that this is science, but it's also a bit woo woo. And I think this is what ancient mystics understood. But we're just now coming into the understanding, okay, we can see that, like you said, on the EEG. And ancient mystics understood these things.
Exactly, exactly. I think they always knew all along about this. It's just that nowadays with the technology, with the internet and all the things, we can reach more people and more people can connect and talk about this. And like you said, let's look at the basics, Tina. What is a thought? How do you generate thought? So it's a neuron, right? Connecting with another. There's a synapse, there's an electrical impulse. So in that impulse, there's a frequency. That frequency carries information, which is what we see on the EEG. Let's look at the EKG. What's the EKG? So the heart, yes, it's muscle, like you said, right? We can talk about muscle and bones, but there's also a very complex electrical system within the heart that sends signals. And the heart is actually sending more electrical signals to the brain. So it's not how we thought that the brain and the mind regulates everything and sends the signals down. It's actually the heart. The heart is letting what your body needs to respond to. So if we can connect that through the vagus nerve and through other things, we can really understand this and say, just like you said, we're not just muscles and bones. There's so much more to us. There's a mind, there's emotions, there's a soul, there's energy, there's electromagnetic fields. I mean, we are so perfect and so complex in a beautiful way that I think we're just beginning to understand that and to discover how it can really improve our lives once we connect to that knowledge.
I wholeheartedly agree. I think that sometimes we forget to include that spiritual aspect, that otherness, that we're not just what we see, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think um, when we understand that by our thoughts, that's what we are creating our reality. Two people could be in the same room and see something and come back with it a completely different way.
Mm-hmm.
It's a matter of our perspective. And because I'm in mental health, I oftentimes talk to my patients about this. I said it's a matter of how you choose to respond to that situation. And you know, yes, and I tell them sometimes they're like my father died, my mother died, whatever. I lost someone, and I'm feeling sad and I'm feeling depressed. And I said yes, and I want you to hear that this is a natural response to an unnatural situation, right?
Mm-hmm.
You lost someone. You should feel sad. You should be a little depressed. That's okay. This isn't your mental illness. Now, if you stay stuck there and you can't move on, then maybe we need to look at your mental illness. But I said, but you have to feel those emotions and go through the grieving process. I can't give you a medicine and wave that away. That's not how this works. I said, this
Mm-hmm.
is something that comes to us all. It's a common experience that we have as human beings. And we need to really embrace that. I worked a lot with hospice patients and dying patients. And so I'm like, you have to come to that realization that life will go on. And you have a choice of staying there or moving with the season, moving with the rhythm of life, getting into that flow. And so we talk about some of those things. So this is how you mentioned starting your business. So what was it like being an entrepreneur? Tell me about how you got started, hanging out your shingle. We want to talk about the nitty gritty stuff.
Sure, sure. I can tell you, I mean, when you start your own business, oh, you have to brace yourself. You have to brace yourself because it's just like starting all over in the sense that you're going to hear so many things, so many tips, and so many people that are successful that you're like, I don't even know where to get started. And I can tell you that I made the choice because I felt that it was going to be better for my health, for my family, and because I wanted to do something without having to worry about someone telling me the way it's supposed to be done. I'm kind of a rebel like that. But when you start your own business, I think the main key is to be consistent. Consistent is Consistency is what's going to get you there because it's going to be a slow curve. There's going to be good days, there's going to be hard days, but you need to remember your why. Like, why are you doing this? And what those limiting beliefs kick in, then that's when you need to really remember why you started all this. So for me, it's been a journey for about 5 years. When after I had those jobs and I met Dr. Joe Dispenza and I started traveling with him, that's when I decided I want to help more people get through this. So that's why I decided to do this on my own practice and expand it. So I decided to combine the nursing coaching knowledge that I had and also doing the workshops to teach the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza and the HeartMath Institute to provide these tools. I wanted people to have the software, the knowledge on how to do this. And it's been a wonderful experience, but it hasn't been easy. I mean, I would be lying if I were to tell you that it's been easy.
And that's important for our entrepreneurs to know that in your entrepreneurial journey, your business is going to have ups, it's going to have downs, there's going to be challenges. What was one of the biggest challenges that you had when you were starting out?
The biggest challenge I can tell you is that I didn't feel that I was good enough. I didn't feel worthy. Simple as that. And then I would go at night sleeping and waking up worrying about how am I going to make this work? Or, I tried to get clients and I was so excited that I was going to get a deal. And then they, backed off and I was crying, frustrating. And then I realized just what we talked about, Tina, it was me. I didn't feel good enough. I didn't feel worthy enough. I didn't feel like I was doing enough for my business. So what was I creating? Lack. I was creating a business from a place of lack, from a place of fear, and from a place of need. When I switched that mindset, I said, okay, no, I got to get my big girl pants on. I got to walk the talk. Everything that I'm teaching, I have to apply to my life. So what am I doing with this business? And that's when I started to do the reflections and the awareness and sitting with those emotions. Like if I was frustrated, I would sit with frustration. It's like, okay, what is causing this frustration? What is it that it's taking my attention away from the other things? And it could be, sometimes it was because I hadn't slept enough, because I was tired, because I wasn't doing any self-care, and it was actually not related to the business. So once I understood that I needed to take care of myself, what was important for my health, and then focus on the business, that's when things started changing. Because I tried for over a year and I wasn't getting clients, I almost gave up. But when I made that switch, when I changed my mindset and I said, okay, I'm going to attract clients from a place of joy, from a place of giving, from a place of service. And then out of the blue, poof, all the clients started to come in, companies and whatnot. And I couldn't believe it. I was like pinching myself. I could not believe that this small switch in my mindset had created such a big impact in my business.
I think that's wonderful. And I think our listeners need to understand that that mindset is so critical to being an entrepreneur, but not just being an entrepreneur. I'm going to say it's critical for your life. You need to know what gets you up in the morning, what makes your heart sing, why are you doing what you're doing, and if you don't love what you're doing, why in the world are you doing it?
Mm-hmm.
you know so that's always been my philosophy. Enjoy what you're doing. So you've been in business for a while, and if you had to give advice to one of our nurses that are thinking about starting a business, what advice would you give them?
I will tell them, first of all, before they start anything and make any decisions, the number one thing that you have to be very clear on is, what is your life purpose? Why are you doing this? And how can you align this that you want to do with your values? Once you align that, the path is just going to, present itself. But you need to be very clear as to why you're doing this. Are you starting a side hustle? Are you starting your own business because you're running away from a stressful job, from a difficult situation? Or is it because you're doing it out of joy, out of gratitude, out of service? It can be either one of them, but you just have to be very clear on why you're doing this, align it with your values and with your life purpose. And that is going to renew you, it's going to recharge you on a daily basis. Because if you're doing something just because you want more money, it's going to be really hard. It's an uphill journey for you.
There you have it, folks. I tell you, that was a great way to end the show, because that's the perfect way to get us thinking about how we're going to enjoy what we're doing and doing what we love. I want to thank you for coming on today, Giovanna, and thank you for your wonderful wisdom and everything. We could sit here and talk for hours about this mind-body thing, because I really love the information that you're giving. How can our listeners contact you if they have further questions?
Absolutely. So you can find me on Facebook, just like my name, Giovanna Navarro. I have a LinkedIn profile also under my name, or you can go to my website. I have everything super simple, giovannanavarro.com.
All right, that's wonderful. I want to thank everyone for listening to the NeuroShark Academy. Don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe to our show. You can find us on Podbean and other places, as well as our YouTube channel. Thank you so much for being here today. I want to thank you.
Thank you, Tina.
Thank you for listening to the NeuroShark Academy show wherever you get your podcasts, or watching us on YouTube. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and don't forget to hit the notification bell so that you'll know when all of our episodes come out. If you want further information, you can contact us on the NeuroSharkAcademy.biz.